My name is Calder, just Calder. No middle name, no fanfare. At 53, I had built everything I thought a man could ask for. A thriving logistics firm that bore the fingerprints of every sleepless night I had ever endured. A home nestled in the heart of the city, where glass towers kissed the clouds, and a wife who once told me I was her anchor in the storm. But storms shift, don't they? The morning it all came undone wasn't dramatic. It was mundane, almost cruel in its simplicity. I remember the bitter taste of my coffee, the way the ceramic cup felt too hot in my hand. I remember the tremble in my assistant's voice as she handed me the envelope. "It's from the board," she said. Just 5 words, and everything I had built began to dissolve beneath me like sand in a rising tide. They said the numbers were down, that I had failed to adapt, that new management was essential. Of course, they didn't mention that my protege, Miles, had been whispering poison into their ears for months. I had taught him everything, groomed him to lead in my absence, never realizing he'd weaponize my trust. The irony? They gave him my position before they even told me I was out. Just like that, 28 years of sacrifice reduced to a forced retirement package and a hollow speech about legacy. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just walked out of that office with a manila envelope in my hand and a phantom weight on my chest. When I got home that evening, I expected some version of comfort. Instead, I found Claire, my wife of 17 years, sitting at the kitchen island with a packed suitcase beside her. Her expression wasn't angry. It was rehearsed. "I think we both know this was coming," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I can't do this, Calder. Not anymore. I need more than survival." I stood there, still wearing the suit I'd been fired in, wondering if the punchline was hiding somewhere in her tone. "Is there someone else?" I asked, my voice too calm, too detached. She didn't answer, but she didn't deny it either. She just picked up her suitcase and walked out. In the span of one day, I lost my company, my wife, and every ounce of certainty I'd ever had. I spent the next few weeks in that big empty condo, listening to the silence echo off the marble floors. The city lights outside offered no comfort. My phone stopped ringing. Friends I'd known for decades vanished into their busy schedules. When your name isn't on the door anymore, the invitations dry up quickly. I thought about selling the place, moving somewhere coastal where no one knew my name. I thought about starting over. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's suitcase and Miles's smug smile. No, I wasn't going anywhere. I started small, quiet. I read books I'd never had time for, watched interviews with founders and disruptors. I studied the market with an eye sharpened by loss, and I took note of one company in particular, Versana. A mid-sized logistics competitor with a flashy new CEO, a growing presence, and a familiar face in their PR department, Claire. Her LinkedIn page had her smiling in their office lobby, her caption full of new beginnings and fresh starts. She had traded our home for their brand. I didn't hate her for it. Not exactly, but it lit something in me that hadn't burned in years. Versana was expanding fast, too fast. They were hemorrhaging money on client acquisition and had just lost a major contract with the Port Authority. I watched from the shadows, my investments scattered across shell corporations and dummy accounts. I bought data, analyzed financial statements, and made quiet moves in the margins. I started recruiting a team, discreetly, surgically. People who had left my former company after I was ousted, people who still believed in me. We didn't talk revenge, we talked opportunity. By spring, I had acquired 2 of Versana's smaller competitors, companies they were in talks to purchase but couldn't close on fast enough. My plan wasn't to rebuild my old empire. It was to create something leaner, faster, and smarter. I called it Lancer Holdings. No one knew I was behind it, not even the board. My face was kept out of all public dealings. I operated through lawyers and proxy managers. I wanted my name to be a ghost in the machine, invisible but undeniable. One night, as I sat overlooking the river from a rented loft, I received an email alert. Versana had just signed a 5-year lease on a new headquarters. A massive gamble considering their dwindling cash reserves. It was the opening I needed. I reached out to a real estate development firm I had a silent stake in and made an offer to buy the building out from under them. It would take months to finalize. But once it did, the rug would be yanked from beneath their shiny new stage. And then came the real dagger. I learned that Versana was planning to merge with a tech startup to save their finances. The deal hinged on a proprietary software, one I had quietly helped develop years ago under a different name. They thought they were acquiring gold, but I still owned the rights to the core framework. All it would take was a cease and desist at the right moment, and their deal would collapse in on itself. I hadn't spoken to Claire in almost a year when I saw her again. It was at a charity gala downtown, one of those stiff, overpriced events with glass wine flutes and artificial laughter. She didn't recognize me at first. I had lost weight, grown a beard, and traded my tailored suits for darker, simpler clothes. But when our eyes met, her smile faltered. "Calder?" she asked, uncertain. "You look different." I nodded. Life has a way of doing that. She seemed nervous, like she didn't know whether to apologize or explain. I didn't ask for either. "How's Versana?" I said casually, sipping my drink. Her expression tightened just slightly. "Busy. A lot of changes." I nodded again, letting the silence stretch just enough. "Yeah, I've been hearing things." That night I walked home alone, the city humming around me, and I knew part 2 was about to begin. Claire's eyes had followed me long after I walked away from that gala. I could feel them burning into my back, as if she were trying to trace the new version of me through the bones of the man she had once known. But she didn't see it yet. Not really. The truth was, I was no longer Calder the founder or Calder the husband. I had become something else entirely. A ghost in the system. The man no one noticed until it was already too late. The morning after the gala, I met with my lawyer, a quiet bulldog named Winthrop, who wore suits 2 sizes too big and never smiled unless he was delivering bad news to someone else. "The IP filings are complete," he said, sliding a thick envelope across the glass table. "They try to use that software, we bury them in court." I took the papers and nodded. That move alone would shake Versana's foundation, but I wasn't done, not even close. My team, assembled from former colleagues, disillusioned talent, and a few razor-sharp newcomers, was working in a co-working space under the name of a tech shell I had created years ago, Iron Key Solutions. No one knew Iron Key was just a mask for Lancer Holdings, and no one suspected that behind the calm, faceless paperwork, I was staging a takeover that would gut Versana from the inside out. By April, Versana was desperate. Their merger talks were stalling. Investor confidence was plummeting. Their PR releases, crafted with Claire's familiar turn of phrase, grew more frantic, more hollow. I watched the press like a hawk, noting every pivot, every shift in messaging. They had no idea their software deal was a landmine. I just needed to time the explosion right. In the meantime, I focused on securing leverage. Versana had been trying to secure funding from an aggressive private equity firm called Belridge Partners. I knew Belridge's reputation. They liked risk, they liked blood in the water, and most of all, they liked secrets. So I leaked one. A confidential report from Versana's own board, detailing internal doubts about the sustainability of their expansion model. Nothing illegal, just enough truth to breed fear. Within a week, Belridge backed out of negotiations, citing concerns regarding operational misalignment. Translation: they smelled death. Versana's stock, already teetering, began to slide. Employees started jumping ship. I hired 4 of them within a month: engineers, account managers, and one particularly bitter VP who gave me access to internal files that should have been locked behind layers of clearance. I read every word, learned about upcoming client meetings, debt obligations, and most crucially, Claire's role in pitching their next funding round. And that's when I saw my next move. They were planning a lavish investor dinner at the Elmsworth Hotel. Exclusive, invite only, with every major stakeholder in the room. Claire would be presenting. The software demo would be front and center. And the startup they were merging with? I already knew they hadn't finished the back end. They were depending on repackaging my old framework to fake it. It was the perfect place to detonate. I didn't crash the event. That would have been too dramatic, too obvious. Instead, I sent a cease and desist to the hotel's legal department anonymously just 2 hours before the dinner. In it, I detailed the pending lawsuit surrounding intellectual property theft and warned of the financial liability tied to hosting an illegal demonstration. The hotel canceled the event. Investors were told it was a scheduling mishap, but the truth spread fast. Claire didn't show up to work the next morning. I watched it unfold from my penthouse. A different one now, rented under a different name, different ID, facing the same city but from a sharper angle. The news started covering Versana's spiraling value, rumors of internal disarray. A quote from a former executive, my plant, hinted at leadership mismanagement. Within a week, their board convened an emergency meeting. I knew the clock was ticking. Then, something unexpected happened. Claire showed up at my door. It was dusk. The sun cast long amber shadows across the city, and there she was, hair pinned up, blazer in her hand, face unreadable. "I had to see you," she said. "Everyone's saying, you're behind this." I didn't invite her in. I just leaned against the frame and studied her. "Would it matter if I was?" I asked. She hesitated. "They're saying you're buying Versana." I didn't answer. Her voice wavered. "Why, Calder? Just to ruin me? Was that the point all along?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so far from the truth. "You left, Claire. Not just me. You left everything we built, and now it's falling apart. And you think I lit the match?" "I needed stability," she snapped, emotion cracking through. "You were spiraling, and I didn't know what to do." "No," I said softly, "you just didn't want to fall with me." Silence hung between us, the kind of silence that's louder than shouting. Finally, she whispered, "So it's true then. You're taking it all." I nodded, not out of spite, out of precision. She looked down. "You were always good at that." When she left, she didn't slam the door. She didn't cry, but her shoulders were hunched, like a woman who had finally realized the past doesn't stay buried. It waits, it watches, and sometimes it comes back smarter, sharper, and with an iron grip. A week later, I made my final move. Versana's board, exhausted, cornered, and desperate, accepted a buyout offer from Lancer Holdings. They had no idea who owned the majority stake behind it until the signatures were dry. That's when I walked into the office. It was surreal. The same lobby I had once visited as a rival now echoed with my footsteps as the new owner. Claire was there, at her desk, silent, pale. She stood when she saw me. "Is this personal?" she asked quietly. I gave her a long, slow look. "No, it's business." But inside, it was everything. The morning after the acquisition, I arrived at Versana's headquarters early. Earlier than I needed to. The sun hadn't even stretched over the skyline yet, but I wanted that building to feel my presence before anyone else walked through its revolving doors. The security guard didn't recognize me, not until I stepped into the executive elevator using the master key card that had arrived by courier the night before. I didn't offer a smile, just a nod. My office now sat on the top floor, the one Miles had once gloated from when he ousted me from my own company. I didn't even sit down in the chair. I just stood by the window, arms crossed, looking out over the city. For a long time, I let the silence speak to me. Then, I picked up the phone and called my assistant. "Begin the internal review," I said. "Department by department, I want names, roles, redundancies, contracts, and liabilities. Full report by end of week, no exceptions." By 9 a.m., the building was full. Buzzing. Nervous. They knew something had changed, even if they didn't yet understand how deeply. I had made no press statement, no media appearance, No inspirational LinkedIn post with a sunrise photo and empty platitudes. I didn't need to announce myself. I was already there. Claire's office was still on the same floor, corner glass walls always filled with orchids. I knocked once before stepping in. She turned slowly, expecting someone else. When she saw me, her posture stiffened. "I suppose you'll want my resignation," she said, voice flat. I tilted my head. "I didn't come for that. Not yet." She blinked. "Then why are you here?" "Because I want you to be the first to know that everything's about to change." She crossed her arms. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a promise. And maybe a chance." I left her with that. I wasn't here to humiliate her. I wasn't here to throw her past choices back in her face. I had already won. Now it was about building something that couldn't be taken from me again. The restructuring began that week. 30% of Versana's staff were offered severance, politely, efficiently, and with strategic generosity that ensured no public backlash. The company had been bloated, inefficient, running on borrowed time and inherited arrogance. I trimmed the fat, rebuilt core teams, restructured leadership, and hired lean, focused talent who wanted to build, not coast. The board? I removed them all, one by one, legally, quietly, and with airtight golden parachutes they couldn't refuse. Within 2 weeks, the company looked completely different, and the outside world took notice. The headlines were cautious but intrigued. Silent billionaire reshapes Versana after shocking acquisition. Is Lancer Holdings the future of logistics? Suddenly, the man they thought had disappeared was back, but they didn't know it was me. Not yet. I kept my name buried in the paperwork. Let the myth do the talking. One evening, as I walked past Claire's office, I saw her packing up. Her desk was half empty. She didn't notice me watching, but something about her movement, slow, almost resigned, pulled me in. I stepped inside. She looked up, startled. "I didn't want to just vanish," she said. "That's not who I am." "You did it once before," I replied, more sharply than I intended. She nodded. "I know, and I've hated myself for it every day since." We stood there for a moment in silence. "I was scared, Calder," she finally said. "When you lost the company, you stopped speaking to me like I was part of your life. You shut down. I didn't leave for someone else. I left because I felt like I was watching you drown and you wouldn't let me throw you a rope." I swallowed hard. There was truth in her words, truth I didn't want to admit, but now wasn't the time for reconciliation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "You don't have to resign," I said. "If you want to stay, stay, but it won't be comfortable. I don't run things like before." She studied me. "I know, you've changed." I had to. I left her there with her half-packed box, not looking back. Over the next few months, Versana transformed. We rebranded subtly, kept the name, but shifted the messaging. No more shallow marketing, no more hollow partnerships. We focused on real value: adaptive freight systems, proprietary AI routing models, and lean, scalable services. The same clients who had once flirted with our rivals came back, cautiously at first, then confidently. Revenue stabilized, then surged. We became the predator, not the prey. And I? I never stepped back into the spotlight. I remained the architect behind the curtain. Occasionally, my team would joke about how the press kept referring to me as a mystery genius. I let them. The power was sweeter when no one could see where it came from. Claire stayed. She didn't run. She took on a new role, less public, more strategic. She kept her head down, delivered results, and slowly regained the respect of those around her. Not once did she try to speak about us again, and I didn't bring it up either. Some wounds need time, some space. Others just need clarity. One day, as I reviewed financials in my private office, my assistant knocked. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "Who?" She hesitated. "Miles?" I didn't flinch. "Send him in." He walked in dressed like he still thought he owned the room. Expensive suit, polished shoes, and that same smirk that had once sealed my downfall. But I saw the wear in his eyes, the slump in his shoulders. He was losing, and he knew it. "Calder," he said, forcing a smile. "Hell of a move you pulled." I leaned back in my chair. "I didn't pull anything. I just picked up the pieces you dropped." He chuckled dryly. "I came to offer a deal." "You think I'd make one with you?" He spread his hands. "You've got Versana, fine, but you need contacts in Southeast Asia. I still have them. We could partner, start something new." I stood slowly, walked to the window. "I don't need your contacts, Miles," I said without turning. "I already hired your team, the ones who matter." He fell silent. I turned to face him. "You taught me something valuable, though, about betrayal, about ambition, and about how to survive it." He gave a small, bitter nod. "Guess I underestimated you." "No," I said. "You just forgot who taught you how to win." I didn't shake his hand as he left, and he didn't ask for one. When the door closed, I felt nothing. No anger, no triumph. Just balance. I turned back to the window, city lights blinking like stars beneath me. And for the first time in years, I let myself breathe. But the story wasn't over yet. The door closed behind Miles with a soft click, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a kind of peace. Not joy, not victory, just peace. I stood at the window for a while, watching the city glow beneath me, a silent reminder that everything changes, and yet, somehow, some things endure. I had built, lost, and rebuilt on my own terms. But as much as I had tried to do it alone, something had shifted again, and this time it had nothing to do with Miles or boardrooms or power. It had to do with Claire. She had stayed. Through every restructuring meeting, through every hard decision, through every cautious silence. She hadn't asked for forgiveness. She hadn't tried to rewrite the past. She had simply shown up. And sometimes that was the most radical kind of apology. I walked down the hallway to her office. The door was open. She was working late again, staring at her screen, unaware that I was watching her the way I used to in the early days, before we were distant, before we were broken. I knocked gently on the frame. She looked up, surprised, then softened. "Long day?" she asked. "Long year," I said, stepping in, "but it's over now." She nodded, eyes searching mine. "Miles?" "Gone. For good." There was a pause, and in it, something unspoken passed between us. A silent acknowledgement that we had survived everything that was meant to destroy us. "I've been thinking," I said, "about what comes next." She leaned back slightly, guarded but curious. "For the company?" "For everything." I sat across from her, folding my hands. I built this place back up out of nothing but grit and obsession, and for a while I thought that was enough. But it isn't. Not anymore. The empire means nothing if I'm still going home alone, if I'm still waking up thinking about what I lost instead of what I could still build. Her lips parted slightly, unsure whether to speak. "I never asked for you to come back," I continued, "and you didn't ask for a second chance. But maybe that's exactly what this has been. A long, quiet second chance." Claire looked down at her hands. "I don't want to make the same mistakes again." "Then don't," I said. "Let's make new ones, together." She looked up at me, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then she stood, walked around the desk, and for the first time in years she placed her hand in mine, deliberately, calmly, without hesitation. "No press releases," she said. "No grand announcements. Just us. Real this time." "Real this time," I echoed. That night we walked out of the office side by side, not as broken parts of a failed marriage, not as cold colleagues rebuilding a company, but as two people who had finally come full circle, who had lost everything and still found each other in the ashes. We didn't need to say the words. The silence between us had already rewritten the ending.